All right, so getting ready here to post my second video for YouTube. And it's gonna be for 2 doors, exterior doors for my outside shower. I'm gonna complete that, which will be fantastic. We'll have privacy and it can be usable. I'm in South Carolina, so the family can come back from the beach, can wash off. You even could just take a shower out there in the morning instead of in the house if you chose to. Few things that I learned from my first video that I posted. 47 minutes is pretty long. So this particular build is going to be broken up into 2 separate episodes, probably about 30 minutes each. And then secondly, I'm going to be recording things in the future. I didn't do it necessarily for this one, unfortunately, but I will be recording it in landscape mode, right? So that will get rid of those ugly black bars. I hope you enjoy this video and you get something out of it, and things will get better from a filming perspective as we move forward. So thanks for tuning in. So any decent sized project that I do, I try to draw something up. As you can see here, I'm not the best artist, but at least something's on paper. It gives me a rough roadmap to follow, and gives me the ability to kind of conceptualize or visualize, what I'm trying to accomplish. You can see here I have some rough measurements. So generally, this is what I want to do. Whether the doors turn out like this completely aesthetically, probably not. But again, it's a rough roadmap. So I'm ready now to start cutting some wood. Okay, on to the next project. So I'm going to be working on a shower door. Shower's sitting here behind me. As you can see, it is lacking a door. So that's what I want to get done. Started this project last year. It's been a long time coming. There's been no rush, but need to get this finished so when it's nice and warm, this coming year we can come back from the beach or even just take a shower in the morning. That's how I picture myself doing that. Anyway, the structure itself, I use tigerwood for it. And you can see here, it's kind of pan across, there's 2 openings. I'm going to be doing some shutter windows. So 2 different shutters in each section you can push out, so you can have the privacy if you want it. Or of course, you can have, see the view if you want to do that, if no one's around. And then, yeah, just need to do some doors here. There wasn't any tigerwood available at the lumber yard, so I ended up getting some sapele, which should be great. It's a nice resistant wood as well, so it should last just as long as the tigerwood. And that's the next project. I'm gonna cut the sapele to length. The piece that I bought at the lumber yard, I was blown away with how expensive it was. So I'm gonna make this work. Also, I have some leftover tigerwood from the shower, so I'm gonna incorporate that. It is 1.5 inches thick, 5.5 wide. So I'm going to cut it at a 54 length, and then I'm going to get 4 sides of my doors out of this. So they'll be about 1.25 inches wide. So not tremendous, not a ton of meat. I normally like to over-engineer things, but I'm going to try to keep this one a little more tame. And anyway, I'll cut that, and then we'll rip it, and I'll be back. All right, so I ripped the sides for the doors. They're 1.25 thickness each, or width, and then the thickness actually is 1.5. I have this nice remainder piece. So I'm gonna cut, some pieces for the top and bottom. The top's gonna be a little bit, not quite as beefy as the bottom, just traditionally I think that's how it's seen on doors. So that makes sense, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut that now. Cut the top and bottom boards, so that's kind of what it's going to look like. Now the total width here is 37 inches. I'm actually shooting for 35. I'm going to do mortise and tenon joints for both of the sides, here and over here, and on top and bottom. So that'll be the next thing I'll do. All right, so for the mortise and tenon joint, I'm going to cut it 3/4 of an inch deep, and that's what the amount of wood we're going to leave on the inside. For the tenon joint, and then we'll do the mortise joint in a minute. All right, so the tenon joint turned out pretty good. See, they're all pretty uniform. I got to clean them up a little bit with a chisel, which I'll do later. Now I want to cut the mortise. So in order to figure that out, I just used my square, and we figured out obviously what the depth of the cut was, and it's uniform. So I set my gauge and locked it in, and then I'm just coming over here to the neighboring piece where it's going to, abut to, And I'm just gonna make a mark, and this is, you know, normally you won't use a magic marker or a permanent marker, but I do wanna be able to see what I'm marking here, because I'm gonna remove all this material that's gonna have permanent marker on it. Same thing here. It's good. Same on the other side. Just try to make sure the square is flush. Good, and then when it comes to, you know, how deep it needs to be, I just normally will butt up this piece of wood, and we can see it's pretty much coming about to here and about to here. So it's kind of what I'm looking at. Black marker is what I'm going to remove. Probably will use a drill bit, and then I'll use a router here with a tiny little bit just to clean out everything, and then I'll do that for all the pieces, you know, all the neighboring pieces. All right, gonna clamp these down, make sure it doesn't move anywhere. Got my bit just slightly smaller than the space I need to drill out. And then at least start to remove some material. And I want to go, it's about 3/4 of an inch deep, so I'm going to be careful here initially, and then I'll come back with the router and get it to the right depth. So that's a good start. I'm actually going to use some chisels here and just go around the perimeter just to make sure I keep it pretty tight. And we'll do that, and then I'll wrap up, come back to you with the router in hand. All right, so I use a chisel just to kind of go around the perimeter of that cut, or what I need to take out. And, you know, most importantly, I think, is going here at the end grain just to, you know, make sure that as you're, whether it's drilling or whatever, nothing's splitting out and taking out that, you know, and moving beyond that perimeter. And I'm going to try this little router, right? So I got this tiny little bit in there, something's really easy to manage. I'll drop it in one of these drill holes and just start to remove some material, see how that goes, and go from there. Did a pretty good job. Real pleased with it. So I'll just set it to the proper depth. I'm going to take it, you know, maybe, I don't know, 3/16 of an inch at a time, just not to stress it too much, but seemed to work real well. So my friend Bob decided to join us. I'm in South Carolina, and there's a lot of these. You leave the garage door open, and they're everywhere. Anyway, that's Bob. I'm sure we'll see more of them later. This is what I determined. First one went fine, just took a little longer, always getting a feel for things. So I ended up this time, you know, outlining what it needs to be, used a small drill bit to drill some pilot holes. I'm using now this bigger drill bit, which is just about the exact size I need. And then I threw on my tape, so it's 3/4 of an inch down deep. I'm just gonna quickly go straight down, fill each one of these pilot holes with the bigger bit, come back with the router with a tiny little tip there, do some finer finishing work, and then I will use a chisel just to get out any meat, and we should be good. So I'll throw this one on fast forward. Finish that up in about, I don't know, maybe 8 minutes. So not terrible. Nice tight fit. Slide it right in there. So, a couple of them done. Going to tackle the top one door at a time. and should knock it out pretty quick. I won't video the rest. All right, so here's the doors. Did the mortise and tenon joints last night, which went pretty smooth. You can see a couple here. I will tell you, the forearms are pretty tired. Doing a lot of chiseling last night, but anyway, that's done. I have this board here sitting across. I'm gonna create a little cross member there and put it into both frames, so naturally I have to cut that. And I've also decided that I'm gonna do slats from top to bottom within each one of these doors. Originally I was thinking I might do a raised panel, but I think it's really important to have a lot of natural light. I want it to be light and bright in there, so that's the route I'm gonna go. Cut out those center supports, so ripped it down and cut them to size, and decided I was going to notch them out. So just put them all together, clamped them all together, ran them through the table saw, cut the sidelines, top and bottom, then took them individually, ran it through multiple times, chiseled it out, just made it nice and flush. And yeah, it came out really good. You can see really tight fit. So very pleased with that. Now I'm on to the bottom, and I think I am going to do a raised panel down here and then slots up top. I just want it to be, I don't know, there's a lot of slats to do, and I don't want to spend all next 2 days doing that, and I don't have a special jig, so that's what I'm thinking I'm going to do. This project, as you can see, kind of is developing as we go. Anyway. So for these raised panels, I'm going to use this tigerwood that's left over from my shower, and this is all tongue and groove. And as you can see, it's just not pulling together very well. So anyway, what I'm going to end up doing, I guess, is cutting off both the tongue and the groove, making it nice and flush. Then I'm going to use some biscuits, going to glue it together. I'm going to create panels for both of these bottom areas here on the door. I haven't done a raised panel before, so this will be something new. I did see some different setups online that you could use a table saw and accomplish it. So I'm gonna give that a go, and I'll record the entire session. Okay, so I cut a variety of this tigerwood. It's 32 inches wide, from side to side. Top to bottom's 25 inches. Now, when I take off the tongue and the groove, I'm gonna lose, obviously, some material. So I just did some quick math, making sure that when I glue this up and I cut everything off and it's all sized properly, I'm gonna have enough for 2 panels here. So I'm just gonna do it all in one swipe. And now I'm gonna go out and take off the both the tongue and groove and get it ready to use the biscuit cutter. All right, just about ready here to do the biscuits, and wanted to lay everything out properly before I got started. So number one, good tip is always number your boards. Yes, I'm using permanent marker, but it's okay. I'm gonna do a lot of sanding to make this level, so I'm fine with that. So yeah, number your boards so you know how to put them back, what the configuration is. And then these hash marks are where I'm gonna be cutting my biscuits. So I'll just make sure, you put a hash mark right through both boards. That way you can line it up easily and make sure that cut is centered and the biscuit will align properly. And then the last consideration that I did here was this line, right, is the middle line basically. So we got 16-inch panels. There's gonna be 2 of them, and I needed 20 inches total in height, and this is about 21, so we're good. What I wanted to make sure I did was, if this is the edge of the board, or this is the edge of the board here, I wanted to make sure that the biscuit wasn't too close to the side, especially if I'm cutting a panel here on the table saw. So I'm going to be cutting an angle off. I want to make sure I did not expose the biscuit. So here we go. finished up cutting all the biscuit holes, and it was a little challenging. Initially I didn't have the tool set quite at the right height. This is not 3/4 of an inch, so I should have used a piece, like a test piece, but I didn't. Either way, got through it. Nice and tight fit here in general, and always good to just line it up and do a quick dry fit before gluing. So looks pretty good. I'm going to get onto that next. So as you know, the panel there of the tigerwood is curing, it's drying. So I figured I'd work on the top slats, and it's a nightmare. It's never a fun job. I've only done it once before, and you can see here, this is actually some previous job that I was working on the shutters. As I explained, for the shower, I wanted to do a couple shutter windows, and I cut all this with a table saw, just freehanding it, which was tedious. I also have a semi-completed shutter here that I had done. Not completely finished, but my concern with this is I'm sitting here looking at the amount of wood that I have, and I don't have enough. And quite honestly, I only have one partial shutter done, and then the remnants here for a second one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this, I'm gonna repurpose this shutter that I've made, which I really like the finish on it, right? So I have a variety of, I think it's some tigerwood and some wenge on here. I gotta cut it a little bit, and I'll take off this bottom base, but this actually would fit in here quite nicely if I use, the table saw and trim it up just a bit. And I really like the look of it. So I just will continue the 2 panels that I've already made. I will put them in here. And prior to completing this one, I guess I'll make a couple, jigs, or not jigs, but just a replica here of this angle that I've used on 2 other pieces to span the entire length. And that should be my easy solution, or semi-easy solution. So that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so disassembled that previous shutter that I had made. It fits in there quite nicely now. I have, I think, enough material pretty much to complete this one door. But ultimately, I'm gonna try to replicate this, which I used the table saw for previously. I'm gonna do hopefully 2 long runs to span the entire length, top to bottom, for each side. That will be the next endeavor. Okay, on to cutting these angles, right? So the trick is, here's the 2 separate pieces I did, and unfortunately, you gotta cut these separately, right? So they have to be pretty well aligned so the slats are level and they look uniform. The trick was I just ended up taking whatever this is, the sled. I changed it from 90 degrees to about 50 degrees. So you can see I just ran this down and buzzed out the material and made multiple paths. And I lined up the lines that I drew on the wood and accomplished it. It was pretty tedious. I'm not looking forward to doing this, but that's the method I used, and that's what I'll do. I'm going to do one at a time, and then I will ultimately have to switch this to the other side and flip it and put it over here. All right, I marked both of these. They are carbon copies of one another. You can just see I put X's as to where I will be removing material. And then I did just partially of these show how I was going to be running. This is me running like this on the table saw. So I will do that now. This is a lot of little prep work, man. It took forever, but hopefully I'll be done this soon. Getting ready to get going here on sanding. It's you know, a new day, getting a late start today. But I did want to give props to a couple things I've used over the years. This shop vac I've had for 10 years at least, and it's sucked up all kinds of stuff. This thing has been killer. And then the jaw horse. I haven't used this in a while, just remembered, was refreshed how awesome it is. It's heavy duty. If you ever need either one of these items, I'd vouch for them. Just like to give credit where credit's due. So anyway, on to the sanding. So this came out pretty good. We have some lips here that, you know, obviously I want to eliminate. I'm thinking I may not do a raised panel. We'll see how it goes. But going to sand this flush. And of course I have my belt sander out. Got 40 grit on there first. Then we're going to go to 80. Then 120. And then I'm going to break out the palm sander. Something I found useful here is you always traditionally when you're sanding, you want to sand with the grain. But when you have pretty good gaps here that you want to try to eliminate quickly, going against the grain actually is very helpful. We'll remove a lot of material. You've got to be careful because you can mar the wood. So less is more in that situation. But I'm going to knock this out. Also hooked up the shop vac to the belt sander. Hopefully that works well. Just going to try to keep the dust down and don't want to spray it all over my neighbor's house. So here we go. Flip the breaker there. So back at it. All right, it's a little windy out here, so hopefully you can hear me just fine. Did the belt sanding, went from the 40 to then the 80, the 40 all across the grain, really took out a lot of the big elevations and unevenness here, and then I came back with 80 going with the grain, which eliminated a lot of the scarring on the wood. Now I'm just going to switch to a palm sander. I'm going to start with 40, then 80, then 120, 180, and 220. Maybe overkill, but it should be nice and smooth. Do that on both sides, and then I'll be done. All right, I finished up the sanding. As you could tell, it was pretty windy outside. In fact, I had the wind blow over the tripod. I was lucky enough to catch it because my iPhone is just a couple days old. But I was reminded of a couple different things out there. Number one is how badly I could use a planer, because belt sanding things nice and smooth and flush is one way to do it. It's certainly not the most efficient, and it's tedious. And number two is that you need to know the type of project you're working on, right? I said I was going to go ahead and sand it, 40, 80, 120, and then come back with the discs and sand it up to 220. There's no need to do that. It's an outdoor shower. All the lumber that I have out there is probably around 120. And I don't want to make it look out of place. It's not a dining room table, right? So just did it up to 120. I think it's perfect for outside. And you can see all the boards are very nice and tight together. I can't see any kind of scratches, so I'm pleased with it. And on to the next step, which will be cutting this and putting it into the base of each one of those doors. I decided against the raised panel. I did watched some videos last night on how to use a table saw and cut a raised panel. And I don't think it's the right application for this because, normally when you're doing a raised panel, it's on the cabinet, the dishes see the inside of the door, it's not dressed up at all. In this situation, I want both sides of the door, the inside and the outside, to be equally as attractive. So I'm going to just use a flat panel and probably do some nice molding both on the inside and outside. So that's the game plan. Anyway, on to cutting this, getting it fit. I'm gonna cut some grooves as well in the frame so that it obviously fits within the frame. I don't have to tack it onto anything, and it will be free floating, which will be ideal for obviously sitting outside and having wood expand and contract. All right, so I cut out the board there, cut it into two separate pieces, gave a 1/2 inch, a total of 1 inch tolerance, so 1/2 inch on each side, tops and bottoms as well. And then I'm gonna go around the perimeter here and channel out a 1/2 inch for all the boards, and I'll have it sit inside of the frame. Now, one thing you definitely wanna be aware of is, number one, when I'm cutting this channel, on this board in particular, I don't want to go all the way down and through. Otherwise, there's going to be an opening down here. So I want to make sure I stop somewhere in here where the cut is hidden. Same thing, obviously, on the other side, and for sure up here as well. So I'll come up to about here, and then this will come straight across. But just when you're channeling out, doing that dado, you want to make sure you don't extend beyond where you want it to end. All right, so it started raining, so I changed locations. I cut the slots here for all the pieces where I could cut straight through. So no problem there. I'm gonna take it back, obviously, several more passes and hollow out all the inside. Should be pretty easy. This is a little bit more complicated, right? So this is the piece, the longer cross member, where I do not wanna impact the mortise here joint that I had cut. So I'm gonna stop short. And then I don't want to be, up here either. I don't want the cuts exposed. So in order to accomplish this, I'm gonna plunge this down on the blade. I'm gonna be very careful with it. Do it gingerly and softly. It's best if I had a plunge router. I don't. So I'll make this work. I'm only going a 1/2 inch deep, so that's reassuring. Anyway, gonna take it slow. One other tip I forgot to mention, you can see I drew a line here, and I also drew a line down here at the bottom. I do not want the saw blade to pass, this area. So I just drew a simple line on the table saw where I can kind of match that up. That way I'll know to pump the brakes, and if I got to go back and use a chisel to hollow it out, that's fine. Just gonna make sure that I stop short of that. Okay, done with that portion of the process, right? So buzzed it through, obviously, 5 times, 6 times, got all that hollowed out. The plunge cutting there on the table saw worked fine. I did have to remove the kerf, which is normally something you absolutely want on the saw. It prevents the wood from binding up on the blade and kicking back at you. I felt like, whatever. Ultimately, considering I wasn't cutting this board from side to side fully, the likelihood of it binding up was slim. So anyway, as you can see, made all the cuts. I'm done with that. Before I use the saw again, I'll put the kerf back on and gonna hollow this out now for my panel. All right, completed the mortise here. So, had to obviously level out just this back corner of each one of these, as well as the front. These were simple, just used a chisel and broke out the fragments. I wish I would have thought of this earlier, but the Dremel, that little Dremel multi-tool is awesome for that. I should have used it initially when I did my first mortise and tenon joints. But anyway, sharing that, hopefully you will use it if you have one. And I'm not giving a plug for anything because there's any partnership or association. This is my second video. I'm just telling you what I think is good. Anyway, we're going to assemble it and hopefully it goes smoothly. Got the panels in, looking pretty good. So on to the next step, which is going to be fixing the kerf on the table saw and then ripping these down to fit in here. I think I have enough slats to at least complete one of the doors today. I'm probably not going to glue everything up, but just going to dry fit it, make sure it looks good. So almost home.